Have you noticed how the headlines seem more ominous these days? In 2025, global security isn't just about distant wars, it's about a world order under strain. Geopolitical rivalries, proxy conflicts, and domestic unrest are converging, creating a security environment that's as volatile as it is complex. Let me set the scene. From the Middle East's simmering tensions to rolling cyber attacks in the West, we're witnessing what analysts call hybrid threats, a blend of traditional warfare and digital sabotage. You might be thinking, isn't conflict always part of global politics? True, but what's new is the speed and scope. Information warfare and kinetic action now reinforce each other, making escalation harder to predict and contain. So, what does this mean for ordinary citizens, policymakers, and even business leaders? The answer: no one is insulated. The ripple effect supply chain shocks, energy price swings, and even local protests are now globalized. In the next few segments, we'll break down these dynamics starting with state-based armed conflicts and leading all the way to domestic unrest and strategic recommendations. Buckle up. Let's dive right into the most visible aspect of today's security landscape: state-based armed conflicts. Take the Russia-Ukraine war. Despite global fatigue, there's no diplomatic breakthrough in sight. Sanctions still biting. NATO reinforcing its eastern borders like it's 1,985 all over again. But Ukraine isn't the only hotspot. Israel's recent airstrikes on Iranian military and nuclear facilities have sent shockwaves through the Middle East. Is this tit for tat, or the opening act of something bigger? And don't forget Sudan, Syria, Yemen, names that might blur together, but each represents a unique proxy battlefield. Here we see the concept of asymmetric warfare, where smaller groups exploit unconventional tactics to punch above their weight. Now, you might ask, why should these distant wars matter to us? Well, instability in these regions leads to refugee flows, global terror threats, and economic turbulence that affects everything from gas prices to food security. The lesson? These conflicts aren't isolated, they're dominoes in a fragile global arrangement. Next up, the US-China rivalry and why it's reshaping everything from tech to trade. If you think the Cold War was ancient history, think again. The US-China strategic competition is the new defining axis of international relations. And unlike the past, this rivalry isn't just about military might, about who controls the next wave of technology. Let's talk tech decoupling. The US is blocking China's access to advanced semiconductors and AI breakthroughs, creating a split in the global supply chain. Think of it as a digital iron curtain that's slicing the world into competing tech blocks. But it doesn't stop at trade. New executive orders are revoking visas for Chinese nationals in sensitive academic fields. Are these justified security measures or a recipe for discrimination and talent drain? Now, some might argue, isn't this just prudent risk management? But consider the feedback loop. As suspicion grows, so do incidents of espionage, fueling an atmosphere of distrust and retaliatory policies. The bottom line: the US-China rivalry is reshaping alliances, economies, and even the fabric of multicultural societies. Coming up, how cyber threats are turning every nation into a potential front line. Picture this. You flip a switch and the lights don't come on. That's no longer science fiction. Cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, energy grids, financial systems, communications networks are now daily realities. Two terms you'll hear a lot: zero-day vulnerability and ransomware. Imagine a thief who finds a secret door into your house before you even know it exists. That's a zero-day. Ransomware? Think digital kidnapping systems are held hostage until a ransom is paid. Recent attacks in Europe and Asia have forced hospitals offline and shuttered ports, demonstrating what's now called hybrid warfare, blending cyber and physical attacks to maximize chaos. Now you may be wondering, why aren't governments better prepared? The truth is, legacy infrastructure wasn't built for this threat landscape, and cyber defenses require constant updates just to keep up with attackers' innovations. The takeaway: cyber resilience is no longer optional, it's a national security imperative. And as we'll see next, information itself has become a weapon. Let's zoom in on an invisible war room fought, not with bullets, but with bytes. Disinformation campaigns are targeting elections and public opinion, eroding trust in institutions across the globe. Let me tell you a story. During the 2024 US elections, a viral video later proven fake spread like wildfire, influencing public perceptions and even poll turnout. This is deepfake technology at work, where AI-generated content blurs the line between fact and fiction. Another key term, botnet. Think of it as a digital army of fake social media accounts, all amplifying the same false narrative to sway real people's beliefs. Now, you might be thinking, can't platforms just filter this stuff out? In reality, content moderation is a game of whack-a-mole, with new tactics emerging faster than defenses can adapt. Resolution, media literacy, and transparent algorithms are essential if we're to reclaim the information domain. But the challenge doesn't end only in domestic unrest as boiling over in the streets. If you've watched the news from Los Angeles lately, you've seen mass demonstrations over immigration policy and federal authority. Protesters clashing with troops on city streets. This sound like the US, you know? This isn't just about one issue. Societal polarization, what some call echo chambers and filter bubbles, is fueling distrust in government and raising the risk of homegrown extremism. Let's talk technical terms. Ideological extremism refers to rigid adherence to far-left or far-right beliefs, while domestic terrorism means violence aimed at intimidating a civilian population for political ends. Now, you might ask, is polarization really that dangerous? Absolutely. When dialogue breaks down, even small disputes can escalate into violence, straining law enforcement, and testing the limits of democratic norms. How do we resolve this? By rebuilding civic trust and protecting the right to peaceful protest while maintaining public order. But legal tensions complicate the picture. Here's a tricky balance: keeping people safe versus preserving their freedoms. Expanded surveillance powers and anti-riot laws are sparking fierce debates in courts and communities alike. Consider facial recognition technology a tool for identifying suspects quickly, but also a flashpoint for privacy advocates who warn of overreach and abuse. Civil rights groups are pushing back, arguing that these measures risk turning democracies into surveillance states. Now you might be thinking, aren't these laws temporary, just for emergencies? History suggests that once adopted, such powers are hard to roll back. On another front, rising anti-Asian sentiment, especially targeting Chinese Americans, shows how geopolitics and security rhetoric can fuel discrimination at home. The challenge is clear: how to protect national interests without sacrificing the very rights that define a free society. Next, let's examine the economic and environmental pressures compounding these risks. Let's talk about the pressure cooker beneath it all: economic and environmental instability. Inflation is hitting young people especially hard, fueling protests and deepening generational divides. Technical term time: stagflation, when slow economic growth meets high inflation, a combo that's tough for policymakers to fix. And inequality, the widening gap between the haves and have-nots, is stoking resentment and unrest. But it doesn't end there. Extreme weather events, from hurricanes to wildfires, are displacing entire communities. Climate-driven migration is putting emergency systems and social cohesion to the test. Now you might ask, can't governments just provide more aid? In practice, stretched budgets and political infighting mean responses are often reactive, not proactive. The result? Both wallet and weather are driving instability, making resilience a whole of society challenge. So how are defense, diplomacy, and economies adapting? Let's break down the strategic implications. Now, let's pull back and look at the big picture. Rising military budgets, especially in the Indo-Pacific and Middle East, signal that governments are preparing for worst-case scenarios. On the diplomatic front, alliances are fraying while new blocs form outside traditional Western spheres. This multipolarity more than two major powers complicates collective action on everything from climate change to conflict resolution. Meanwhile, protectionism is making a comeback. Countries are restricting trade and prioritizing domestic supply chains, leading to what some economists call decoupling, a move away from global interdependence. Socially, trust in institutions is eroding, and xenophobia is rising as people look for scapegoats in uncertain times. Now you might wonder, is democracy itself at risk? The answer depends on how societies respond to these pressures. Up next, 4 key recommendations to navigate this new era balancing security, rights, and resilience. So, where do we go from here? First, invest in cyber resilience. That means not just firewalls, but robust backup systems and public-private partnerships to defend critical infrastructure. Second, strengthen civic institutions. Media literacy programs and transparent governance are vital to counter polarization and restore trust. Third, enhance multilateral diplomacy. No country can tackle climate, trade, or cyber threats alone. International cooperation, think Paris Agreement or new trade pacts, more important than ever. And finally, balance security with civil liberties. Security measures must be targeted, temporary, and free from discrimination. Remember, rights lost in a crisis are rarely restored without a fight. Ultimately, a resilient society is one that adapts without losing its core values. That's the challenge and the opportunity of global security in 2025.